We now come to the last session of this very short webinar. And the topic now is preparing your church now. But before we go into this afternoon's topic, let's just do a quick review of the first session. First session was how the scene could be during this pandemic, telling us quite scary things which are actually not imaginary, but gathered from factual, authoritative sources, medical, economic, political, etc. And the scene is that until a vaccination is available, and we're not even sure we can find a good and safe vaccine, at best 2 years, more likely more, and possibly even never. It's not so easy to develop a vaccine that is good and safe. So until that time, there will be cycles of quarantine. It's not like it's lifted up on May 15 and then it's over. No, the virus is still around. People will still get sick. Some will die, and panic will arise again. So, assuming the quarantine is lifted, and then 2 weeks' time, spike of cases in your city or your town or your province, and there's panic. So what happens? The legislators will have to come in and say, we have to enhance the situation now and have some kind of quarantine. Depends how many people died. And so that will happen. And then after a while, the economy suffers whenever there's a quarantine. And when the economy suffers, you have to release the quarantine, remove it so people can get back to earn a living. And then people die again. So it's always a balance. This is why the cycle goes, open, no more quarantine, open the economy. People get sick and they're dying. Quarantine again. Everybody's starving, no job. Stop the quarantine, jobs back again. And then, people die. It can go on very many times. Terribly upsetting. If you're not ready for this situation, it will send you crazy. But if you're ready, then it becomes not a catastrophe, but an opportunity. All right, so that's the scene. Potential, possible scene. Then the second session we dealt with action. What must you do to prepare for this possible scenario? And so in this, the second section, we said, we got to start to learn new skills because it's a new situation. We've never had a pandemic worldwide in all of our lifetimes. All of us, this whole world has never had a pandemic like this. We need to get the tools for this. My cell phone is not working properly. My Wi-Fi is terrible. My members are in trouble. None of them even have a proper gadget, and nobody even knows how to use the Zoom or whatever. So you got to get into action. And then you have to now learn to rethink your theology, because all along you have been taught to minister inside a building. That's what you were trained for. That's what you have been doing. And all of a sudden the building is empty because people cannot come. So your theology now has to be reoriented. Okay? So here we see the actions we need to do as pastors. We have to be the ones to be the model. Leadership is not about telling people what to do. You don't have a remote control in lives and tell them what to do. Nobody. Don't dream you have it. Okay? Only God can work in our lives, and He doesn't even interfere with our lives. He allows us to make choices. So the only thing you must do right now is don't tell people what to do. You as a leader make the necessary changes. I always say leadership is not telling people what to do. Leadership is first changing yourself, not trying to change the world. So as a leader, you have to model this. Willingness to learn new skills. Getting a gadget that works, that is critical for this era, for this time. And then have a theology, right, that is correct. So you have to do these things. Now we come now to, all right, what is this theology? Before I go to telling our church how to do, let's get our theology correct. We have biblical theology, and sometimes that has been overshadowed by traditional theology. Now, if we go to the Bible, in Acts chapter 8, Acts chapter 8 was a turning point in the church. Up to that point, the church was still based in Jerusalem. The new converts, who were mostly Jews, loved the temple. The Jews loved the priesthood. And for them to leave Jerusalem was to leave this sacred thing called the building, the temple, and the priesthood. So it was like 1,000 over years, 2,000 years in that culture. So they hung there, and then in Acts chapter 8, God had to do something. What the Bible tells us is, and there was a great persecution, Acts chapter 8 verse 1, against the church at Jerusalem. And they were all scattered abroad. Wow. They wouldn't leave. They loved their building. They loved the rituals of the temple. Scattered. Acts chapter 8 verse 4 says something very nice. And therefore they that were scattered abroad, all they that were scattered abroad, went everywhere preaching the word. This Acts chapter 8 at this point began the expansion of what was a very tiny New Testament church, few thousand believers. From Acts chapter 8, we see the expansion of the church literally turning the world upside down after this. So our theology, we are Bible believing, has to teach that God had to scatter his people to expand the church. Now, in church history, of course, it's not so much in the Bible. In the Bible, there's no mention of a building in the New Testament. What we call a church building doesn't exist in the New Testament. But church history tells us, for the first 300 years of the church, people worshipped in their homes until an emperor called Constantine in 312 AD, 300 years later, got converted. I put my finger in inverted commas. I'm not sure he really was. But when he did, he institutionalized the church. So all the little house churches now became under Roman organizational power. Romans are the greatest organizers in the world. The Roman army was the picture of perfect organization. And so what happens, the house churches that were reaching out everywhere, salt and light throughout the world, were now lumped together, pulled together into one monumental building, which we call church today, or cathedrals, or basilicas, or whatever. And then from that point onwards, the traditional form of worship was within a purpose-built building. So that is the traditional model. But the early church was house church. And the end days church, last days church, where the Antichrist comes in with all his anger, will again be a house church. So there was the old normal, early church, and now we may be moving into the new normal. I don't know. But in the end times, it will be. And some of you will say, come on, don't over speculate. Let me just tell you now for statistics purpose. 50% of the world now, I'm not talking about the future, I'm not talking about coronavirus, I'm not talking about COVID pandemic, no, I'm talking about now, before the COVID, has to worship in house churches. 50% of the geography of the world. China, 20%, house churches. Muslim countries, the next 20% of the world population. If you are a Christian in a Muslim country, you got converted, you can't go to a church. You go to house churches. Many of you Filipinos know in the Middle East, your friends all worship in houses, in places, in their condominiums or whatever. 20% is China. 20% is the Muslim world, population-wise, right? Another 10% of the world cannot go to a traditional church because they don't have money to go. You live in a mountainous place, you have 10 children, you don't have the transportation, how are you going to go to the city church? That's the only church then in those poor countries. So 50% of the world now, before COVID-19, already, if they want to worship God, have to worship God in a house church. So I'm not talking something that PC is imagining. It's fact now before COVID. After COVID, it's going to be more, all right? So you have to be clear on this first, right? In your own thinking. And then, by having an example in your lifestyle, willing to learn, having the right gadgets, all right? And a willingness to see the church going back to a reaching out face of the church rather than a gathering in of the church into a building. What I call New Testament is always reaching out. Old Testament is coming in to the temple, to the tabernacle. All right, so let's come to today's topic. Prepare your church now. Okay, how do you prepare them? First thing, you got to prepare them using God's word. If you don't use God's word, what do you say? You say, I went to this webinar, I was told this, or I think is this. Nobody's going to follow you. Who are you? Are you that powerful, that charismatic? Is a webinar so powerful? Is Asia Forum so powerful? No. Ultimately, the church, our final authority in faith and practice must be the Bible. All right? And so you have to teach them. This is how the church expanded from a Jerusalem church, from Acts chapter 1 to Acts chapter 7, and then how it became a church that reached the world. And you have to tell them, teach them, okay, that God had to persecute them. And there was then a great persecution so that they would be scattered. Nobody wants to leave comfort zone. The Jews love Jerusalem. That's their zone, all right? Now they were persecuted. And you have to tell your members, God, thankfully, didn't persecute us this time. God didn't give persecution, He gave a pandemic. That's a lot better, all right? And then you have to explain to them about the early church, the Acts church. The church in the book of Acts, people just worshipped wherever it was possible because there was persecution. So they couldn't gather in large numbers, just like now we can't gather in large numbers because there's a pandemic. We don't want to pass infection one to another, right? And so the early church was basically scattered churches everywhere, lighting and salting the world, salt and light of the world. Then you explain to them in the last days, it is likely that the church under persecution, the Antichrist, will again be a scattered church. So maybe God's just giving us a rehearsal. So let's not forget this is all biblical. Right? And then explain to them about the world. Already 50% of the world, if they want to worship, have to worship in small group settings. China, Muslim countries, poor people who have no money, no means to go to a big city church. Okay? So I hope you can explain this to them. And then when the Bible becomes their foundation, the Bible becomes their guide, then all you need to do is to encourage them. Okay? So here we have, it's going to be a challenge. It's not going to be easy. I'm not saying it is easy. I'm saying it's simple. There are two different things. Okay? Simple means there's one step. Easy means, oh, the one step is going to work just like that, like a magic wand. No. Because 90% of Christians are actually more traditional than biblical. That's the reality, including us. Including us. Much as we find it very offensive when we are told you're not Bible living, you're just Bible believing. You talk as if you believe the Bible. You preach as if you believe the Bible. In reality, we don't. All right? That's the reality. So it's going to be a challenge for us. First, it's going to be us. We're going to be convinced, all right, ourselves. Then we can convince others, okay? So it's going to take time because it took something like from 300 AD till now. That is 1700 years. Traditional church. Roman style church. Institutional church, okay? So once we can convince them, then it's no more fear and frustration. See, right now, the average Christian is fearful and he's frustrated. What's happening? Why can't we gather? Our church is going to die. All right? That's it. But you have to tell them, no, this is Bible again. This shows God is correct all along. He was preparing us 2,000 years ago for this house church thing. All right? And warning us that the last days will come back again. Encourage them that we are the only people in the world, the only ones who can worship in a house church setting or a scattered setting effectively, in fact, more effectively. You say, what do you mean? If you're Roman Catholic, you can't do this. You can't. Because most of your faith is built around a building as a Catholic and the rituals in the building. If you're Muslim, you can't. Your faith is built around a building and the rituals inside. If you're a Buddhist or Hindu, it's the same. But as a believer, you are the temple of the Holy Ghost. Know ye not that the Holy Spirit of God lives in you? This is the temple here. It's not a building, all right? So as Christians, encourage them that you are the only one in the world who can do this, okay? So when it's a house church situation, when we are not allowed to go to the big church, to our traditional church, we are now in 30 houses, 50 houses. So what has happened? Are we scattered? No. Are we destroyed? No. What's our situation now? We expanded from one mother church to a mother church with 30 branch churches. As long as you think church is a building, you cannot think this way. But if you know church is people, ecclesia, people, and you pastors all know that, I don't need to explain it and waste time. Church is always ecclesia, right? Referring to a gathering of people, assembly of people. Wherever they gather, 2 or 3 gathered in this house, that house. Tradition says you must have, a pastor there. I said, no, that's not in the Bible, right? So, anyway, if you can convince them, biblically, not by your persuasion, all right, that you have expanded as a church to branch churches, okay? And now you have more potential to reach people, because if you are going to have to worship Sunday at home, maybe your brother-in-law stays there and never goes to church. Maybe your cousins live next door, just in the same subdivision compound as you. Now you're worshiping at home. Come on in, guys, and worship. Now you have more outreach, but rather than dragging someone to church, you're worshiping right in your sphere of influence. Okay? And so you don't have a scattering, you have a potential for expansion. Secondly, right, we have, all of us believe in the universal priesthood of believers. Now we can make it true. Not a theory of our Baptist doctrines or whatever. Oh, the universal priesthood of believers. But in reality, most of us are spectators. As one pastor, the priest there, priest. And we are spectators. But now, when you're home, sorry guys, you have to do something. You need to be trained to lead your house worship, to gather your family and pray and listen to this message and then tie it up for them and then ask them for prayer requests and encourage them. Hey, you become now a pastor of your house church. How do you like that? At last, the universal priesthood of believers. And you as pastors, you're no more now the performer. You're now fulfilling your role as in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11 and 12. For God gave apostles, prophets, etc., pastors, teachers, for the equipping of the saints, for the work of the ministry. So finally, as a pastor now, you come to your real job, not performer, but equipper of your members, who will then do the work of the ministry. Wow, we needed COVID to make us come back to what we have been proclaiming as our fundamental beliefs, but what we have practiced, not practiced as our beliefs, as our practices. You see how amazing this is. You have to believe it, and then you have to share it. And when your members begin to see, like, wow, I went to doctrinal class, I talk about universal priesthood of believers. I talk about Christ living in us. I learn all these things. Now, I have to see it in reality, then I taste God. When you take that step of faith, your members take the step of faith, then they know God personally. They don't know God as the God of my pastor. This is my God now. I need him every Sunday. I need him every day to help me minister to this little flock that I have. All right? So I hope that you begin to see, right, that this is not a calamity, as many praying to come back to normal situation. Of course, normal is more comfortable. Isn't it more comfortable that you all just gather together and one guy does the work, the other 100 people sit there and say, good job, Pastor, I like your sermon. Very encouraging. God bless you, Pastor. Take care. You know? But is that biblical? Or is that religion? Man-made religion. Okay? So, now, those are the theory, the theology behind it. But you have to be practical. Prepare your church. What do you mean by prepare your church? First, get them the right theology. The right thinking produces the right behavior. But if you don't help them in this time, like for example, if your key men or the men in your church who you are going to see have to lead their houses don't have even a decent cell phone or a smartphone, then how are you going to train them at this time? What, by shouting in the air? You can't, right? Your job, pastor, is to equip the saints. How are you going to equip them when you have a lockdown situation? Or say, oh, when the lockdown's over, I've trained. Let's say the lockdown's over and then they have another lockdown. What are you going to do? You're training like this. Break, 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 break. In between frustration, and dispersion. All right? So, number one, be sure right now, while it's still available, encourage all your men to have a good weapon. Weapon of war is very critical. You send a soldier out to war, you better be sure he has the equipment. In this spiritual battle, the equipment we need now to communicate with headquarters, all right? In war, signals, very important. Communication, very important, right? So, same. This war, be sure you can contact your commanders on the field, your key people. Make sure their cell phone's okay. Teach them how to use the applications like Zoom, which is what we are using. You know, this morning I was talking to one of my staff in Sabah. She works with illegals, right? Filipino illegals living in Sabah. You know what she's telling me? These Muslims that she's working with, she does Bible study with them on Zoom. The illegals living in squatter huts, in slum, swampy situations. You know what? They're using Zoom efficiently, regularly. And then there are people in the Philippines say, we don't know how to use Zoom. Wake up. Wake up. It's like you're going to war now and says, I don't know how to use a two-way radio. You want to go to war without communications? So teach them the importance of knowing how to communicate with headquarters, because you now are the training officer of your troops. You are the one helping them win the war. Okay? Because pastor, teacher, for the equipping of the saints, not just spiritually, equip them with the right equipment for the work of the ministry. Okay? Find out yourself, learn. Maybe you have one guy with one good cell phone. Make sure one guy in that area has one good cell phone. And then you get maybe one of these mobile Wi-Fi routers, you know, that can share that message to the people in that area. Okay, whatever. In this time, be sure that they are used to, when you cannot gather together, that you're used to still keeping in touch. I say the word social distancing is a nonsense word. In COVID-19, we don't want social distancing. You get crazy when you're social distancing. You get lonely, you get frustrated, you get angry. You want physical distancing. But socially, you must come closer. And that's possible with technology. You know, right now, I have 200 people on the field. Right? I've never been closer with my troops in mission field than now. Why? Because of COVID. Before I visit them once a year, twice a year. Now I talk to them every morning, Monday to Friday. Social distancing? No. Social closing. Social intimacy. Spiritual intimacy. Physical distancing. All right? So keep in touch with your people. Train them to learn how to keep in touch. Spend time training them on Wi-Fi, on Zoom. Make sure you can disciple them life on life, talking to them. Counsel your members when they need special. Maybe your man on the ground cannot do some of those things you can do. You can talk to your members who are scattered. No problem if you have a decent cell phone in that area. Acceptable Wi-Fi. If you can't do video, do audio. Okay? And then pray for everyone in your church. How are you this morning? Let's pray. How's the situation? How's your job? Let's pray. You know, in the past, you can do visitation once in a while. You can't go every day to visit people. It's tiring for you and for them. And they're out and they're busy, they're working. But when it's quarantine, it's very easy to do internet visitation. I've never done more in my life than now because people are home. It's so easy to communicate. I don't have to spend an hour to go and see them and they're not in and they're late and whatever. Now I just text them, free to talk, then you talk. All right? So, social closeness, students. So, equip your saints not theologically only, also socially, that they begin to realize this is the new socialization. It's not waiting for pastor to come and visit me once a quarter, once in 3 months. He visits me every morning to check in how things are and prays for me. And you know, you could be so close to your people, right? So let me say, you can prepare your church now because if May 15 is lifted, don't think the virus is gone. He'll visit you again anytime. Be ready. Now you say all this is theoretical. PC, it's so easy to talk. Let me tell you, I've seen it in my own ministry. I've never been closer to my troops than now. My home church, okay, Gospel Light Christian Church, we have never had so many people attend church as the time of the lockdown. Okay? Why? Before COVID, our English services, about 2,000 per Sunday, came to a Sunday, listened to the message. My last check, I haven't checked it recently, maybe 2 weeks ago I checked. I said, how many people are views, how many views do we get on our live sermon on Sunday, live sermon on Sunday? The last 2 weeks ago I checked, it was 12,000, 6 times more people. Where did they come from? I don't know. How come I get 6 times more people listening to the sermon than before COVID? I don't know. Prayer meetings, we have never had so many people in prayer meetings. Wednesday night prayer meeting is bursting now, but not physically, on the internet, Zoom. Pastor has got to, the senior pastor now has to increase the number of Zoom slots. Why? Because people are now coming to pray like never before. Before they have to go to church on Sunday, you have to take a transport, you work late, you got kids at home. Now, right in your house, you join the prayer meeting. Before, as a pastor, after Sunday, at church, we eat together. I try to see new people. I try to sit down, there's 1,000 people eating anytime. I go to one table, I sit down and say, hi, how are you guys? Haven't seen you before. I can probably visit 1 or 2 tables on Sunday. That's it. You get stuck there, you eat with them, you chat with them. Now we have Meet the Pastor session on Zoom. Hundreds of them coming. And pastor can talk to all of them. How are you here? What's this? How's this? How's this? And they talk. And then they ask questions after the live session. In the past, 1 or 2 people can catch the pastor and say, Pastor, you said this at the sermon. Let me ask you a question. Now, hundreds can ask questions. Why? Zoom makes it efficient, convenient. Members feel so close to the pastor now, like never before. Before, to talk to the pastor is so difficult. It's people surrounding him, and then, he's stuck in this, got to run for this meeting. Now, no problem. And our offerings have not dropped during COVID. We're fine. Because when you minister to them and they feel they're ministered to, they will give to the church. It's when you are absent during these 2 months, they never see your face, you have no contact with them, you don't have the gadgets, they don't know how to use Zoom, you don't know how to talk to them, you don't know how to train them, you don't know how to counsel them, and you have disappeared from their lives effectively. Of course they forget to give you offerings. You forgot them, they forget you. You say, come on PC, this is Singapore, man. Be real, this Philippines is different. Let me tell you that. Pastors I mentor in the Philippines. Okay. And I asked one of them, I said, how's it doing? I had prepared him. I told him, you get ready for live messages, live sermons on Sunday. I think it was 2 weeks ago I asked him, I said, How are you doing on your life? He said, normally about 200 people listen to my message on Sunday. 2 weeks ago, he told me, I got about 800 now. Wow. I said, then last night or 2 nights ago, I called him up. I said, how are you doing? He said, no, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you now because I have a live Wednesday night Bible study. Whoa, that's interesting. That was last night, I think. Oh, yeah. And he told me, I said, anybody attend? He said, plenty now, more than before, much more. I can't remember the exact time, 2 or 3 times more people attend. He's not suffering financially. Why? He's in contact with his people. His people in contact with him. Physically, they're locked down. They still find ways to take care of the pastor because the pastor found ways to take care of them. All right? So I hope you begin to see that. It's God's method, the scattered method. I hope you begin to see you are a trainer, equipping the saints for the work of the ministry. This is a good model. Okay? And I hope that you believe that if it's God's model, it will work well. All right? Not just work, not just survive. If it's PC's model, if it's a AFL model, don't even trust it. This is not a PC model. It's not an AFL model. Okay? But if you have failed to prepare your people and yourself first, then your people, and then for weeks you have not contacted them, 2 things will happen. 1, they just leave, go back to their worldly distractions. I don't have a Sunday now. I might as well watch news and watch basketball, whatever on TV. My kids watch cartoons, and then get backslidden and hard to come back. That's one scenario. Bye-bye to you, to the church, and bye-bye to God. Scenario number 2. My pastor doesn't give any live sermons for us. There's no training for us. I feel so underfed. So I look for food. And let me tell you, there is a lot out there. Even in the Philippines, there's a lot. And you know what? They will surf the internet until they find one. And I'm telling you now, pastors, many of your members, I know, they tell me they don't get their feeding from their pastor. They get their feeding from another pastor. They found that pastor so caring, understands their needs, the message reaches them so efficiently, speaks to them. They have all kinds of midweek training, not from their pastor, not from their church, from somebody else. So you have an illusion that if you don't contact them, they just go to bed and sleep and wait for you. I'm sorry, that's not the case. I'm sorry about that. If you don't make effort to reach them and do it well, somebody else will. The devil will, or another pastor will. Right? If the kids don't go to Sunday school because they can't and you don't provide anything, they'll find something for their kids. And when one day the vaccination comes and COVID's history, so are you. You are history. You're irrelevant. But let's not even think so long. You got to eat the next few months, Pastor. Let's be real. If you don't take care of your people now, are they going to take care of you? Will they sacrificially give to you if you will not sacrificially prepare and feed them now? I'm going to ask you this question. You expect them to sacrifice for you and you're not even willing to sacrifice by learning new things, getting out of your comfort zone and going all out for them. Will they go all out for you? Real questions. for a real situation. It's going to be a breakout session after this, I believe. Gather together in your breakout rooms. You'll probably put you in rooms and discuss. What are the real challenges you face? The biggest challenges you face now. Not scenario. Money. I have no money for weeks' offerings. Right? I have no plan. That's a challenge. I don't even have a cell phone now, a good one that can contact them. I don't even know how to use these things that you've been talking about. I don't even know how to run Sunday school. I don't even know how to run training on the internet. These are real challenges. Discuss these things in your breakout room. And immediately, this is not time to say, oh, let's talk about it one day. You got to eat tomorrow, my dear brother. And your members are not going to wait for you. They're already surfing the net, or they're just saying goodbye to you. What are you going to do this week? What can you do immediately? Discuss these things. This is not some theory. I didn't do this webinar for fun. Right? A lot of the stuff you get on the internet is something very nice to have. Something good to have. Let me tell you, this is more than nice and good. This is downright life and death, spiritually and physically, for many of us and for your members. So please consider what I said. As I said earlier, if I'm wrong, I'll be the happy guy. So be it. I got no ego to worry about. All right? But if I am right, and the scene does pan out as many people expect, be ready. Be successful. Do amazing things. Not survive. Thrive. Change the world for Jesus Christ. God bless you. See you at Q&A time.